Hello, my name is Michelle Garaki, and I'm the acting interim executive director for the Department of Cannabis Regulation. I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. Aaron, next slide, please. We are going to begin. I guess this is the next slide. One moment. All right, let's start that again. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I see folks are filing in as we speak. We really appreciate everybody RSVPing in advance, and if you've submitted a question in advance, thank you. That is our preference for folks to send questions in advance so we can prepare the answers in advance and answer them during this Q&A. If you have any questions while you're listening to the Q&A, please drop them in to the Zoom Q&A box. I already see about 3 questions in there already. If we have time, we're going to try and get to those, but I just want to say thanks for everybody joining today. This is the second event that we have held of this nature. This is the Q&A virtual lunch hour with Jason. This event is intended to provide more transparency to our applicants and licensees who are going through the cannabis licensing process in the city of Los Angeles, who may have questions about anything under the sun. The only thing that we are going to be mindful of, and we ask you guys to be mindful of, is that we're not going to be answering any questions specific to your application or your future application, current application, etc. So with that, I want to say thanks everybody for joining today. And let's get to the main event, who is Jason Killeen. He, as you guys probably know, Jason Killeen is the Assistant Executive Director for the Department of Cannabis Regulation. He oversees all of our licensing functions here. He is a brain trust of all information, and he is very excited to join you today. As a reminder, our next Q&A virtual lunch hour with Jason will be on July 14th. We will be sending out an email soon about that. Please RSVP in advance. Please remit your questions in advance. They will get prioritized for answering. With that, I'm going to kick it over to Jason. Thank you so much and enjoy.
Okay, I'll start with the first question from Steve D. What is the status of DCR allowing phase 3 round 1 applicants to move to other community plans?
The Planning and Land Use Management Committee requested a report back on that issue, and we anticipate that the committee will take it up sometime in the fall.
Great. The next question is from Nadra T. If you are already verified as a Tier 2 social equity applicant, do we need to reapply?
If you want to participate in the lottery, yes. If you already have a pending application or a license issued, you would not need to get re-verified for those, either the application record or the license to be renewed.
The next question is from a few people, Nadra T, Darwin B, Rakija B, Andrea C, and Demetrius C. How do we get funding, and what are the updates on seed grants?
So the seed grant program is fully supported by state grant funds. At this time, grant funding supports the social equity individual applicant eligibility verification fee waiver program, an environmental review fee waiver program for licensees with temporary approval, and an annual application fee waiver program for, again, folks that successfully navigate through the environmental review process. If that's not what you were looking for, just stay tuned for additional announcements on upcoming grant opportunities. You know, I know Dr. Brown's team has been applying for additional grants, so there may be future announcements.
Next question from Michelle G. Why would DCR charge a social equity applicant's application fee if DCR changed rules during the process and is forcing an applicant to abandon and reapply? Nothing has been done with the application, so why not transfer the paid fee to the new application?
So DCR charges fees for the services provided. So the application fees originally, paid would have covered the cost for DCR to review the materials submitted as part of that application. If that application is incomplete or ineligible for further processing, DCR still incurred a cost to review those documents and make a determination, regardless of whether or not that record ultimately meets the requirement for temporary approval or further processing. Therefore, if DCR abandons a record and it's later refiled, the applicant will have to pay new fees to cover the cost to review that new record.
Okay, also from Michelle G. Social equity applicants who lost their retail location due to non-submittal deposit receipt were allowed to continue with the application process and pay the application fee of $9,075. At the time of payment, relocations in the same community plan area were allowed and expected. Now that the rules changed, not allowing relocations until after temporary approval, so those without a location have to abandon and reapply. Why isn't the application fee transferred to the new application? Why would DCR force applicants to lose that money?
So again, if an applicant submitted an application with a proposed business premises address and they are no longer eligible or able to move forward at that location, then we've already reviewed application related materials for their current location as it was submitted. So if ultimately the record's abandoned because they're no longer able to move forward at that location, they will have to pay the refiling fees, and that will cover the cost of DCR conducting the review of the new record.
From Nick S. How will they pick people in the lottery process, and how will they let us know if we were chosen?
So at a later date, social equity individual applicants verified under the updated criteria that have a qualifying California cannabis arrest or conviction will have an opportunity to register for the lottery. And, DCR will then conduct a lottery, and then folks that are selected through the lottery will be notified. Additional details would be provided at a future date.
Also from Nick, if awarded a license, will we be able to cultivate on property if a location is big enough?
If you apply for and are granted a commercial cannabis cultivation license, you may engage in that activity type, but you have to apply for cultivation and get granted a license in order to engage in that activity.
From Levon E. In regards to lease documents for round 2 retail, can the managing company write a letter for each year of residency for proof? Landlords delete records after 5 years.
So the individual eligibility verification criteria are different from application requirements. So I'd refer them to the expanded social equity individual applicant eligibility verification criteria for the examples of the types of documents that can be submitted to demonstrate residency in a disproportionately impacted area. But that really has nothing to do with the management company or the property owner for the commercial cannabis business.
From Katrina F. What are the operational requirements for an active license, i.e. license is issued, goes out of business, never fully opens? How long will that license be valid or withdrawn so others can be issued?
So speaking for DCR licenses, those licenses are only valid for the year issued and they must be renewed annually. So all licenses, whether it's a temporary approval license or an annual license, will expire after 11:59 p.m. on December 31st of that calendar year. And to renew the license, a renewal application, site control, the business, the tax account being in good standing, payment of renewal fees are some of the requirements that folks will have to meet in order to successfully renew their license. So it really depends on whether or not you're in a position to renew the license at the location that it was issued on. Otherwise, the license just expires by an operation of law. And if it's not timely renewed, there's no more record.
From Sienna Marie S. If we chose tier 3 during phase 2, when do we pay the in lieu fee, and what is the in lieu fee based on, and how much is it?
So the social equity agreement is a requirement for phase 2 tier 3 applicants during the annual application process. For specific information about the criteria and the requirements, please refer to Municipal Code section 10420.
Also from Sienna Marie, why do applicants that paid their renewals and submitted all of their paperwork, why do their licenses say expired in the portal?
So that ties into the earlier question, which is records and licenses are only valid for a calendar year. So when your 2021 record expired on December 31st, we updated those records to a status of expired license. So if you timely renewed and you have a 2022 record, you have an active record, and what will have changed on the record is the year for it being issued. But you would have a current record for the current year if you applied or you timely renewed your license.
From Madlena N. Do we need to have a location for the storefront lottery?
No.
Also from her, what are the chances of winning the retail lottery? How many applicants will be applying and how many licenses will be available?
I can't speak to the chances at this moment. It's going to depend on how many folks get verified under the updated criteria, how many of those folks have the qualifying California cannabis related arrest or a conviction, then whatever subset ultimately registers for the lottery. So your individual odds are going to be based on the total number of social equity individual applicants that successfully register for the lottery, divided by whatever number of application spots are available.
From Darwin B. When are the fee waivers becoming available?
So currently DCR has grant funding dedicated to fee waivers for the social equity individual applicant eligibility verification process, for the environmental review process, and the annual application process. Fee waivers are provided on a first come, first served basis based on the submission of the required record. So if you submitted a social equity individual applicant eligibility request form and you got your confirmation email that it was submitted, you would have already had a fee waiver applied to that particular record. So everybody through yesterday who had submitted their eligibility request form has already been issued a fee waiver. For businesses with temporary approval, those businesses were eligible to start submitting their Form 4013, which is their project description form, which launches the environmental review process, and we're starting to issue those fee waivers. And then at some later date, folks will have the opportunity to have their application deemed complete and file their annual application, and we'll start issuing fee waivers at that point. So it really just depends on which fee waiver they were talking about and where they are in our process.
From Andrea C. How fast will the pre-application be processed? We were told 30 days, but I waited 4 months and lost my space.
So under the amendments adopted in April of this year, DCR is trying to complete the review within 30 days. Our vacancy rate exceeds 20% right now, so it's not a mandated processing timeline. But if I understood the question, it sounded like it took 4 months to complete it, which means that record was submitted well before the municipal code was updated in this past April, and a number of different factors could have impacted our ability to complete the review. There could have been another application pending and filed before it. There could have been sensitive uses. We could have been looking at the eligibility for the location. There could have been a utility disconnect. There could have been other unlicensed commercial cannabis enforcement at a location that we were having to research before we were able to make the determination.
From Piero S, how do I receive legal help for social equity applicants?
So the city has partnered with the Los Angeles County Bar Association, and we have a pro bono legal assistance program. Recently, that agreement had been expanded to include phase 3 retail round 1 applicants and social equity applicants that have applied for the non-storefront delivery only. LACBA will generally pair an applicant with an attorney within 1 to 2 business days from the date that they receive the DCR referral. And folks can visit our website to find out more about the pro bono legal assistance program.
Also from Piero S, I was already verified as a social equity applicant 2 years ago. Why do I have to apply again?
So if somebody has a pending application or they have a license, then it's not necessary for them to reapply to continue with their either open application record or to renew their temporary approval license. However, folks looking to participate in the lottery have to be verified under the updated criteria. In 2020, the City Council adopted updated social equity guidelines, and it's a requirement for the social equity individual applicant to meet those criteria in addition to having the qualifying cannabis or California cannabis related arrest or conviction in order to participate in the lottery. So it really just depends on what the individual did with their original verification and whether or not they're looking to participate in future, licensing opportunities.
From Erica W, what type of background check is required?
Not 100% sure what the question means, but as part of the state's application process, the state will conduct a live scan, which is a form of background check where they look at an individual's criminal history. At the city level, we're not requiring individual live scans because it would be duplicative of the state's process. We have various attestations that folks are required to submit in their individual capacity as part of our application process.
From Stanley B, how do I log back into my application?
So you should have received an email with a link to return to your application. If you didn't receive a link, and you can try navigating back to the JOT form and seeing whether or not your computer has information stored. Otherwise, you'll have to start from the beginning. But when you click the save and you send yourself the email to give you the link, or you submit the application, you'll get an email with confirmation that it was submitted, and you'll have links in those communications.
Following up on that from Stanley, what do I do if I didn't get a saved spot confirmation on my application?
You can, if you don't have an email communication that has a link, I would recommend going back into the browser window that you used and navigating to the eligibility request form and seeing whether or not the system has your saved data. If it does, it'll prompt you, it'll give you the option of either starting from the beginning or picking up where you left off.
From Rakija B, why aren't the previous verified applicants able to open retail?
So it's two pieces. So if you were previously verified as a social equity individual applicant, you have an opportunity to participate on a social equity application for delivery, which is a form of retail. If you're looking to participate in the lottery, the code requires you to get verified under the updated criteria.
From Tyrone S. Where can I apply for conditional use permits for properties to qualify for cannabis businesses?
So a conditional use permit is not issued for commercial cannabis activities. To apply for a commercial cannabis license, you can navigate to the DCR licensing portal, and the links are available on the department's website.
Also from Tyrone, where can I find zoning information related to cannabis businesses?
I'd refer the question to check LAMC section 105, which is the cannabis location restrictions section. It's also linked on the department's website and can be found under laws and policy header. You can visit ZMS to view the general zoning information for a property within the city. So those would kind of be the resources that people can look at.
From KDP, how will the upcoming zoning changes to community plans affect cannabis businesses, particularly EMMDs? For example, the Harbor Gateway Community Plan update changes commercial zones to regional center zones. Will an EMMD still be required to relocate prior to December 31st, 2025?
So it depends. If the zoning was not compatible and compliant when the license was issued, the business got a phase one business or an existing medical marijuana dispensary got the benefit of limited grandfathering. That limited grandfathering was originally going to expire at the end of this calendar year. And as part of updates made last year, it was extended through December 31st, 2025. If the location was never compliant and compatible under our existing land use ordinance, when the limited grandfathering expires, the business will have whatever non-compliant licenses are there will have to be relocated to a compliant location or the license will just expire. Failure for folks to timely relocate will ultimately prevent them from renewing their license for calendar year 2026. And really, at the time the business submits the relocation request, will be the time we look at the applicable zoning to determine whether or not it complies with Municipal Code Section 105.
Next question from Nairuth B. Does DCR put a tax on commercial nursery activities? The cannabis tax guide in July 2021 stated that the license types that are subject to the 2% gross tax and does not include nursery tax.
So nursery is a form of cultivation activity and it falls under the cultivation tax umbrella.
Next question from Demetrius C. When will DCR begin the lottery?
Hopefully before the end of the calendar year.
From Destiny L. If I receive a delivery only license for my current location, can I apply for a retail storefront license at the same location in the future?
If you're eligible to submit a retail storefront application in the community plan area where you have your current license and the proposed business premises location meets all of the zoning and land use eligibility requirements, then yeah, you can submit it there. But if you don't have the ability to submit a retail storefront location or there's sensitive uses around that location or that community plan area is subject to a finding of undue concentration, you may not be able to pursue adding that activity.
Also from Destiny, if I get a delivery only license at my current location, can I operate other types of businesses not cannabis related at the same location?
Maybe. So certain activities like alcohol and tobacco sales are prohibited by law. But if you wanted to sell shoes, as long as you had the necessary business tax registration certificates for retail sales, non-cannabis, and any other permits that you may be required to get for those activities, you would be able to engage in those activities at the location. You'll just need to make sure that your premises diagram submitted by the department clearly distinguishes where you're engaged in cannabis activities, and folks don't have the ability to get into those restricted areas. That's what we would be looking for.
Okay, next question from Christian C. At what stage will the $597 invoice be applied? After the verification submission, or only to individuals who receive a slot after the lottery has been conducted?
So I assume this is associated with the eligibility verification request process, which is open now. So those fee waivers are issued on a first come, first served basis once the eligibility verification request form is submitted. So we're keeping track of how many waivers have been granted and how much money we have available for waivers. Once all of those monies are exhausted, we will be invoicing requesters the $597 fee. All of that's going to happen well before the lottery is conducted.
From Derek S. Some of our tax return files are too large to upload to the system. This is preventing us from filing the full tax returns provided by our filers. Is there a way to manually submit documents, or are there any plans to increase the maximum allowable file size?
So there's no plans to allow people to manually submit documents. The maximum file size on the eligibility request form is 50 megabytes. So if you have files that are larger than that, you can compress the files, or you can convert the files to a different file type that uses less storage.
From Maurice C. Does the language in section 104.03E4 Roman numeral 2.3 imply that cultivation licensees are exempt from the 2,500 square foot expansion limit so long as they are in an existing building?
Hang on, I'm looking up that section. The answer is no.
Okay. Next question from Kenji K. What advice would you offer me regarding the best cannabis business license to pursue for someone like me who is truly on a shoestring budget? I want to get started on a foothold as a legal cannabis business owner operator. Do you suggest any specific type of license that has a lower bar to reach for considering my limited resources?
People have heard me say this multiple times. The department does not provide business advice or legal advice, but I would suggest that you take advantage of the online educational resources that are offered through the social equity program and through the learning management system. That describes various license types, and the social equity programs director, Dr. B, has worked with various vendors to put together materials so that folks can understand what they're getting themselves into and what it would take to operate a commercial cannabis business. And those resources may be helpful in helping you make this determination.
From Michelle D. If applying for a new license and we pay the $597 fee and then subsequently change buildings, do we have to pay again if it's within the first 30 to 45 days?
If you submit a pre-application review record, that record is tied to the one address that you listed on the record, and that address may not be amended. So if you can't move forward at that location, you'll have to submit a new pre-application review record and pay the $597 fee.
From Ricardo W. Why did the impact area change?
I'm going to assume that this is associated with disproportionately impacted areas. So in 2020, the city conducted an expanded social equity analysis, and that analysis was based on different criteria. So looking at cannabis related arrests, looking at income, and the vendor was able to provide the city council with kind of a menu of options. So based on the analysis and the options selected by the city council, the expanded analysis was updated and the municipal code was amended to reflect updated disproportionately impacted areas based on police reporting districts tied to the expanded social equity study. So that's why the impact areas changed. We were tasked with doing an expanded analysis. We looked at different criteria, and different criteria are going to lead to different disproportionately impacted areas. And ultimately, it was adopted by policymakers as the criteria for the updated social equity eligibility verification criteria.
From Jesse F. If I didn't receive an invoice when I submitted my social equity recertification application, does that mean I received the fee waiver?
If you submitted a social equity individual applicant eligibility verification request form through yesterday, then you have been granted a fee waiver. Again, fee waivers are going to be provided on a first come, first served basis. And individuals that do not receive a fee waiver because we've exhausted all available monies will be provided an invoice within about 5 business days of submitting their request. But to date, everybody who has submitted has been eligible to receive the fee waiver.
Also from Jesse F. Will the lottery be conducted 15 days after the lottery registration ends on 12/7/22?
I don't know where the 12/7/22 date comes from, but the municipal code requires DCR to provide at least 15 days notice, but DCR has the discretion to provide more notice. So once we've gotten through processing all of the eligibility request forms and we're starting the registration process for the lottery, we may announce what date the lottery will be held. But I don't have that information at this time.
From Samantha T. Will we be able to apply for grant funds for CEQA assistance?
So if you have temporary approval, the city has limited funding to provide the basic environmental review fee waiver. And those fee waivers are still available. So our existing businesses who have temporary approval are eligible to submit their project description form, and we're issuing fee waivers on a rolling basis. So it will really depend on if you have temporary approval at the time, and when you get temporary approval, when you submit your environmental review documents, whether or not there's any fee waiver monies available.
From Tamika D. If a license application is abandoned, is the entity that applied or the social equity individual applicant that will be able to apply again within 1 year?
It depends on the application type. So a non-social equity application must be refiled as the same applicant entity. A social equity application may only be refiled by the qualifying social equity individual applicant that is listed as an owner of the applicant entity. Those refiled applications may be refiled either as the original applicant entity or as a new applicant entity. The qualifying social equity individual applicant still has to have the requisite equity in the applicant entity for the social equity application to be processed.
Also from Tamika, if phase 3 round 1 applicants can't find a compliant property in their community plan area by July 1st, will their application be automatically abandoned?
So temporary approval applications that don't meet the filing requirements will be abandoned. And abandonment could occur before July 1st. A compliant location, a business premises diagram, proof of site control, a property deed, or a lease for that location are all parts of the temporary approval application filing requirements. So if an applicant can't meet those requirements within the filing period or the correction period provided by the department, that application will be deemed abandoned.
Question from Jeannie C. What are the guidelines for individuals who want to grow cannabis, personal use only, on their property, inside and/or outside?
So I'm going to caveat this answer with DCR does not regulate personal use cultivation, but under state law, adults 21 and older can cultivate up to 6 cannabis plants in or on the grounds of their private residence. The plants have to be in a locked space and can't be visible to the public. Many local jurisdictions have adopted stringent guidelines and laws to kind of choose the time, place, and manner for the personal use cultivation. So I would refer you to your individual city's guidelines because they vary by city, and there are a lot of cities in the county. So I don't know what your particular guidelines would be.
Also from Jeannie, can I grow home-based and sell clones to dispensaries in general Los Angeles County?
So within the city of LA, you will have to have a commercial cannabis license to engage in the referenced activity. However, I can't answer questions about LA County's like policies. So if you don't live in the city and you're not conducting activity in the city, you're going to have to refer to either your local jurisdiction or for unincorporated parts of the county, you can refer questions to the Office of Cannabis Management.
From Dejane E. What is the best way to work with your offices as we navigate the application processes?
Be sure to familiarize yourself with local and state laws. Read our website thoroughly. Go through the application workflow documents, the information and procedures bulletins that are posted. If you're a contact on an active record, you can email questions to dcrlicensing@lacity.org. Just make sure you provide the application number in the subject line so that we can kind of identify the phase and the activities. And then your email, if it's a specific question, will get routed to the assigned DCR analyst who can further assist with your inquiry. We try to get things routed within 48 to 72 hours. And then depending on the analyst workload, it may take longer for them to respond. Or you can try calling DCR during normal business hours.
Also from Dejane E. What resources are available to help applicants locate properties?
So folks have to conduct their own due diligence. The municipal code, ZMIS, which is the zoning information map access system, and the DCR licensing map are resources that an individual could use to try to identify whether or not a property may be compliant, but ultimately DCR will only vet a proposed business premises location for eligibility and compliance through either the pre-application review or relocation modification review processes.
From Sergio F. Does a social equity applicant qualify for a micro business license?
So at the local level, a micro business license is a form of retail storefront license or non-storefront delivery license. So a social equity individual applicant may be part of a social equity application applying for non-storefront delivery. And, the zoning may be such that it would have to be considered a delivery only micro business license. But for retail storefront, you would have to be selected via the lottery to apply for the micro business retail storefront license type.
From Laura D, how long is it taking to review LLC articles of incorporation? It's listed to take 45 days. Is it faster or longer?
It depends on how complicated the articles of incorporation are. The 45 days is an average. So half of them take less than 45 days. The other half take more than 45 days.
From Yelena K, does DCR anticipate setting a deadline for submission of LIC 4013 project description forms?
We don't have a deadline at this time, but completion of that form is required to begin the environmental review process, and completion of the environmental review process is a prerequisite for us to start the annual application process and deem an application complete. And given the fact that the state has deadlines where they're not going to allow businesses to renew provisional state licenses after January 1st of 2025, there's kind of an artificial deadline already set by the state, so that if folks can't navigate and get their local annual license, they're going to be precluded from operating until they meet that requirement and then ultimately get their state annual license.
From George, during the war on drugs, I gave LAPD various AKAs to avoid arrest. Will the docket, a name search from Superior Court, and my criminal background from the Justice Department that has my AKA be sufficient?
I don't know. It's going to depend on whether or not you can give us a document that we can tie to your legal name and you as an individual.
A question from Anonymous. How can I find out the status of my application? Tier 2, who do I call and where do I go?
The quickest way would be to log into the DCR licensing portal and go to my records and look at the record status. You can also submit an email to DCR licensing and provide your application record number.
Also anonymous, when will the city reopen the PCN application process? Will the new PCN application process be open to areas that were PCN in 2019, like downtown?
So currently we plan to reopen the public convenience or necessity application process in Q4 before the end of the calendar year. The public convenience or necessity application process is limited to areas that are subject to a finding of undue concentration. So if the area was unduly concentrated in 2019, most likely it'll still be considered unduly concentrated unless records got abandoned, licenses were not renewed, there was something that occurred that caused that community plan area to fall below the threshold to be considered unduly concentrated. And, as I've said a couple of times, as we get closer to making the public convenience or necessity process available, more information about what areas are considered unduly processed at that time will be published on our website.
From Philip A, is DCR giving any consideration to current Type 9 licensees from Phase 3, Round 1 in the next Phase 3, Round 2 Type 10 licenses? Will there be a potential certain consideration given to obtain a Type 10 license?
The answer is no. So the non-storefront delivery license type was separate from phase 3 retail round 1. And, folks that want to participate in the phase 3 retail round 2 lottery have to get verified under the current criteria. They're going to have a qualifying California related cannabis conviction or arrest. They're going to have to register for the lottery. And then ultimately, if they're selected via the lottery to submit an application, they'll have the opportunity to submit an application and navigate through the process.
For delivery, when does the year start before the application is deemed abandoned? Are you safe if you already have a state temporary license?
I mean, abandonment is tied to the local record. It has nothing to do with the state temporary approval or licensure process. So if the applicant cannot meet the local requirements for the application to be deemed filed, and they're unable to bring the record up to filing standards during either the original filing period or the period to cure provided by the department, the record's going to get abandoned, regardless of what's happening with your state application.
From Maurice C. DCR has more than 20% vacancy rate. Why is DCR beholden to the city's civil service application? If DCR needs to staff up to meet the demand, it seems like this restraint should be lifted.
So the DCR is one of the city's departments, and we're subject to the civil service process. So the city has a limited number of exemptions that the mayor and city council have authority to grant departments. And as a newer department, we didn't have any of those preset exemptions, and there are only a handful of those exemptions allowed citywide. And all of our licensing related staff are in common civil service classifications, and there are civil service lists that we have been certing and interviewing from. And unfortunately, that is going to be our process. Typically, the mayor and city council will consider exemptions for positions that are of a unique type, where that skill set could not be achieved through the civil service process. And our licensing positions don't meet that criteria.
A question from Anonymous. I want to open a restaurant that serves food cooked with THC on the menu. Do I need a cannabis license to open this restaurant?
Based on the question, it looks like they're manufacturing consumable items with cannabis byproducts, so you would need a license. And the city does not allow for on-site consumption. So just based on the question as written, it doesn't seem like that would be something that they could move forward with at this time.
Question from George. Does the magnitude of a marijuana charge give you a leg up? For instance, in my case, I went to prison for marijuana sales.
No, the significance of the charge doesn't, the qualifying California cannabis arrest or conviction meet the criteria. And once you've met the criteria, there is no additional benefit for the prison sentence term, whether or not you were arrested versus being convicted and you serve time, you've met the criteria.
From Sergio F. If I am able to apply and acquire a license before 2025, will that allow for grandfather status?
So limited grandfathering was only available to existing medical marijuana dispensaries that were eligible to submit a Proposition M priority processing application in 2018. So if you do not have a phase 1 license, you are not eligible for the limited grandfathering.
Also from Sergio, how does the micro business license lottery application become available? And how can a social equity applicant get the business vertically integrated in the cannabis industry?
So at the local level, a micro business license is a type of retail license, and it could either be retail storefront or non-storefront. So if it's a retail storefront, you would have to go through the lottery, and we will be, basically selecting folks from the lottery to reach undue concentration citywide as of whatever capacity is available prior to the lottery. So you will need to participate in the lottery if you're trying to pursue a retail storefront license, whether that's general retail or it's micro business. Social equity applicants can apply for more than one activity. And in general, you need to have 3 distinct commercial cannabis activities to apply for a micro business license at the state level. But the definition of micro business differs between the local jurisdiction and the state.
Thank you. A question from Anonymous. Will the DCR be collaborating with the Office of Cannabis Management for cannabis business activity in outer LA County?
I mean, we're a resource for the Office of Cannabis Management. As folks know, LA County is considering adopting cannabis-related regulations and policies for the unincorporated areas, and they're asking us for feedback on our process. They're looking at our process. They're looking at Long Beach's process. They're looking at other processes within LA County. And ultimately they'll make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors and implement their own program. But we won't have any oversight over their program or how they implement their program.
Thank you. Question from Anonymous. Can 2 social equity individual applicants apply for a Type S license in addition to delivery or retail?
So a Type S license is a form of non-volatile manufacturing license. If you hold the Type S license, you're allowed to share your equipment with other licensees when it's not in use by you. Any licensee using the equipment is required to have their own license. And then of course, there's nothing that precludes people from applying for commercial cannabis, activities that are available to them based on their social equity status or what's available at the time that they're submitting the application. So in general, if somebody had a Type S non-volatile manufacturing license and they're a social equity applicant, they could also apply for non-storefront delivery. Retail storefront's going to be limited to the lottery.
Thank you. Last question. Is a micro business 3 or more activities at one location, i.e. manufacturing, distribution, and cultivation?
At the local level, a micro business license is always a form of retail license. It's either associated with a retail storefront or non-storefront delivery license. At the state level, you can qualify for a state micro business license if you're applying for 3 or more activities. So you could, for instance, apply for a state micro business license if you were engaged in non-volatile manufacturing, cultivation, and distribution, but the nomenclature is different between the state and the local level. So if you don't have a retail license at the local level, you can't engage in any retail activities.
Thank you. Now, the actual last question from Sergio F. Can a social equity applicant apply for retail, non-retail, and distribution under this program?
You know, again, it all comes down to, one, I'm going to make the assumption that you're a verified social equity individual applicant, or you're partnering with a verified social equity individual applicant to submit a social equity application. And then two, for the retail storefront, you'll have to be selected via the lottery. For the non-storefront delivery, social equity applicants can apply for that activity at this time. They can also apply for cultivation processor, nursery, non-volatile manufacturing, distribution. They can apply for a number of activities via the DCR licensing portal.
Thanks, Jason. That was the last question.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Jason. It was really helpful. Hopefully folks found this webinar very helpful. I believe we got through approximately, if I can see correctly, almost 65 questions. So thank you everybody for submitting your questions in advance. The next one is going to be on July 14th. Mark your calendars. You'll be getting an email about it soon. For those folks that asked questions in the chat box, thank you for remitting questions. We got through as many as we could. I really appreciate the comments and the thank yous. We're trying to essentially, this department, we're really trying to change the narrative here, and we're trying to make ourselves more accessible, trying to create more transparency. And I just want to let you know, this is not the only opportunity for you guys to ask Jason questions or to ask anybody any questions. We're always available via email. You can also call the office. You can email DCR licensing at lacity.org. You can email cannabis at lacity.org. We're trying to improve customer service and response turnaround times. So hopefully there are multiple opportunities for you guys to get your questions asked. I want to say thank you to everybody for attending today. And we are going to have another one on July 14th. I want to say thank you to Jason for your patience. Thank you for being so very, very detailed in your answers. And lastly, I think that is it. Oh, we have one more webinar on June 14th for our verification process. This is going to be the last webinar that will be available for folks that are looking to get verified. You can find more information about the verification process on our website under the social equity section. And if you have any further questions, we look forward to hearing you. Thanks everybody for coming. This will be recorded. This has been recorded. It will be up on our website after this. Thanks again. Have a great day.